I was 34 when I realized my family didn't see me as a person, just a wallet with legs. Hey Reddit, I'm Caleb, and I guess you could say I've always been the nice one in the family. The quiet one. The reliable one. The one who sends birthday cards on time. Who shows up early to help set up chairs before the barbecue. Who never raises his voice even when he probably should. And somehow, somewhere along the way, being nice turned into being invisible. Or worse, being useful. I'm the youngest of 3. My brother, Jonah, is 5 years older and works in construction management. My sister, Ivy, is 7 years older, a stay-at-home mom married to a loudmouth named Darren who thinks sarcasm is a personality. Growing up, they always kind of teamed up against me. Not in this shove him in the closet and steal his lunch money way, but in the subtle, paper-cut way. Every joke had me at the punchline. Every achievement I had was followed by must be nice or don't get cocky. I wasn't the golden child. I was the errand boy. The one mom called when the garage door broke. The one Ivy called when her car wouldn't start. The one Jonah called when he was a little short till Friday. I told myself they loved me in their own way. That maybe they didn't know how to show it. That if I kept showing up, they'd see me. Eventually, I work in tech. Got lucky with a startup in my 20s, stuck through the storm, and by the time I was 32, I had a very comfortable cushion. I don't lead with it. I don't show off. I drive a regular car, wear hoodies most days, and live in a modest house that I actually like because it's quiet, peaceful, mine. I've offered help over the years. I paid off part of Jonah's credit card debt when he was drowning in interest. I helped Ivy and Darren with a down payment after their second kid. I never asked for repayment. Honestly, I didn't expect it. Maybe that was my first mistake. Still, even after all that, I was never invited to things like I mattered. Not really. Ivy once threw a birthday party for my nephew, Ryan, her oldest, and forgot to tell me the location changed. I showed up to a bounce house in the rain, confused, holding a Lego set and a smile that felt increasingly ridiculous as the minutes ticked by. When I finally found them at the indoor trampoline park, hours later, Ivy just laughed and said, "Oops, I thought Jonah told you." Then she turned back to her wine slushy like I didn't exist. And I stayed, ate soggy pizza, took photos for everyone else. Went home that night and told myself, again, they don't mean it. That's the thing about being the family doormat. You keep wiping your own feet on yourself, trying not to track dirt into their chaos. But something changed a few months ago. Maybe it was burnout. Maybe it was therapy finally getting through. Maybe I was just tired. I started saying no. Quietly, politely, but firmly. No, I can't drive mom to her appointment. Jonah lives closer. No, I won't co-sign Ivy's third refinance application. I don't think it's a good idea. No, I won't be attending Darren's latest business launch party. That's just a pyramid scheme in disguise. The responses were icy. Cold shoulders in the family group chat. Passive-aggressive messages from mom about how family is supposed to show up. But I held the line. For once. Then Ryan's 14th birthday came up. Ivy was throwing a small thing, just family. And I thought maybe, this was a reset button. I decided to bring a gift. Not just any gift. A PS5. I'd snagged 1 month earlier, knowing how impossible they were to find, and kept it sealed in the closet, waiting for the right moment. This felt right. A way to extend an olive branch. Something Ryan would love. Something that might remind everyone I wasn't a vending machine, but I wasn't the villain either. I showed up early, of course. Helped set up the folding chairs and string up the banners. Darren barely grunted in my direction. Ivy gave me that air kiss thing she does when she's too busy to pretend. Mom was already critiquing the cupcakes. I stayed quiet. I smiled. I told myself it would be worth it when Ryan opened the box. And then he did. I didn't even get to hand it to him. Ivy just pointed and said, "That one's from Uncle Caleb," like it was an afterthought. Ryan ripped the paper, flipped open the box, and his eyes lit up for half a second before he caught himself. Then he snorted. Actually snorted. "About time you did something useful," he muttered. "Mom says you're just a lonely loser with money anyway." My stomach dropped. I looked at Ivy. She was laughing. Not nervously. Not awkwardly. Full on, nose wrinkled laughing. Darren howled. Jonah chuckled from the kitchen like it was some kind of roast battle, and I just lost. Even Mom cracked a smile behind her wine glass. And I stood there, frozen, holding a paper plate of pretzels like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to the floor. That's when it hit me. They didn't just take me for granted. They didn't just forget me, or dismiss me, or sideline me. They resented me. Resented what I had, who I'd become, and most of all, that I'd stopped kneeling at their altar of dysfunction. I smiled. Not big, not wide, just enough. Then I pulled out my phone. One by one, I began canceling everything. The auto pay on Ivy's mortgage contribution? Gone. The family phone plan I'd been quietly covering for years? Terminated. Jonah's Netflix profile under my account? Removed. Darren's shady LLC I'd helped register with my name? Revoked. The grocery delivery subscription Mom had been using under my address? Disabled. No yelling. No drama. No scene. Just a few taps, a few swipes. Silent retribution. That night, after the cake and the fake hugs and the photo Ivy made me take while whispering, "Don't ruin the mood," I went home. Packed a bag. Just the essentials. Left the rest. Everything they associated me with. The family handyman, the tech guy, the babysitter, the helper. I left it there. On the kitchen table, I placed a small box. Locked. No label. No key. I left a note beside it. Figure it out. Then I left. I drove for hours that night. No destination. Just quiet roads and the sound of rain against the windshield. For the first time in years, I wasn't running errands. I wasn't heading to a rescue. I was just driving. For me. As for what was inside the box, well, let's just say they figured out pretty quickly what happens when you burn your bridge and the architect who built it. But that part, that's where things really begin. Let me back up, because you need to understand how it got this bad. How I ended up being the family's personal ATM, punching bag, and chauffeur. And how one teenage boy's snide comment finally knocked the last brick loose from a wall I'd been patching for a decade. It started years ago, with a different gift and a very different birthday. Let's rewind to when it really started going off the rails. Long before the PS5, long before the box on the kitchen table, and long before Ryan turned 14 and called me a lonely loser in front of everyone I once called family. It was Ivy's birthday. Not her big 4-0 or anything. Just 37. But she was one of those people who treated every birthday like a coronation. A full weekend event, color-coded itinerary, brunch reservations, and a dress code, which she would send in the form of a digital invite that said things like boho garden chic with an attached Pinterest board. I used to try to follow along. Bought linen pants once. Never again. That year, the party was at their house. Darren had just relaunched his marketing firm, again, and was going on about some crypto partnership that was about to change the game. I kept quiet, sipping lukewarm lemonade and nodding like I understood a single word coming out of his mouth. Meanwhile, Ivy was basking in her spotlight, making her rounds like she was hosting the Met Gala in a 3-bedroom colonial. I'd bought her something nice. A leather tote she'd been eyeing, the brand she always talked about but said was too ridiculous to spend money on. I remember wrapping it myself and adding a handwritten note, something cheesy but warm. For all the chaos you juggle, something worthy of it, I'd written. I thought maybe it would mean something. When she opened it, she blinked at the bag, looked at the label, then made a face like she'd bitten into a sour grape. "Oh, Caleb, you didn't have to go this overboard." Then, I kid you not, she turned to Darren and said, "Can we return this? I think the color's off for fall." The room laughed. Again, always with the laughing. Darren made a joke about Caleb trying to buy his way into heaven. Mom tittered. He's just too generous for his own good. And Jonah, sitting on the edge of the couch with his third beer, added, "We should have all gone into tech, huh?" I stood there smiling while something small and sharp twisted in my chest. I told myself it wasn't personal. Ivy was just being Ivy. Darren couldn't help himself. Mom didn't mean it. Jonah was just trying to be funny. But then Ivy's daughter, Ava, who was 10 at the time, piped up with, "Uncle Caleb always gives people stuff they don't want. He gave me a book last Christmas." Cue another wave of laughter. I don't think I've ever hated the sound of joy more than I did that night. It wasn't joy. It was mockery wrapped in mirth. I left early, made some excuse about work, drove home with the tote bag still sitting on the foyer table where Ivy left it. She hadn't even taken it upstairs. After that night, I stopped bringing gifts to every event. Not out of spite. I just couldn't stomach the idea of watching another gift be unwrapped like an obligation and discarded like a mistake. But that shift, as small as it was, didn't go unnoticed. A few months later, Ivy called. "Hey." She said in that sing-song tone she used when she wanted something. Is everything okay with you? Yeah, why? You didn't bring anything for Ava's recital. Not even flowers. I paused. I didn't know I was supposed to. Well, I mean, everyone else brought something. And you're her godfather, remember? That stung. Not because I forgot. I hadn't. I was there, clapping from the second row, recording her solo with my phone, cheering louder than anyone else. But Ivy had reduced my presence to a checklist. No gift. No effort. I apologized. I shouldn't have, but I did. And what did that get me? More asks. More texts like, hey, since you're not busy this weekend, or can you just Venmo me for Ryan's baseball gear? It's easier that way. I kept track of everything, not because I wanted to hold it over them, but because I needed some proof I wasn't imagining the imbalance. In 1 year alone, I'd covered $600 for Jonah's truck repairs, $1,200 for Ivy's emergency dental bill, $300 for Mom's heating bill when she claimed the furnace was broken, countless Ubers, groceries, babysitting hours, and last-minute errands. Not once did anyone offer to pay me back. Not once did anyone say thank you without a half-joke attached. Then came the kicker. I got laid off. Yeah, the startup I'd helped build sold to a larger company, and my department was redundant. They gave me a severance, a glowing reference, and a handshake. And for the first time in years, I had time to think. And the silence was deafening. Not one call from family asking how I was. Not one message. Ivy texted me a week later, not to check in, but to ask if I could help Darren set up his online store. For free. When I told her I'd lost my job, she replied with, oof. Guess it's good you're single and don't have mouths to feed. I don't remember what I said. I think I just didn't. That silence, my silence, became my new boundary. I started pulling back. Stopped replying within seconds. Started saying no. Started valuing my time. They didn't like that. Suddenly, I was changing. Jonah accused me of being cold. Ivy told Mom I was acting too high and mighty for family now. Mom sent me a long voice message about how being part of a family means sacrifice. Funny how sacrifice only ever went one direction. Then, right when I was starting to piece myself back together, got a new job, better pay, better balance, Ivy called again. Hey, she said chipper. So, Ryan's been begging for a PS5, and I told him, Uncle Caleb always comes through. Think you could hook him up? I should have said no. I really should have. But something in me, that old, rusted reflex to please, to earn approval, to maybe, finally be enough, said yes. And I regretted it almost immediately. I bought the PS5. Sealed. Untouched. Held on to it for weeks, watching it sit in the corner of my closet like a loaded weapon. I told myself it would be the last gift. My final offering. After that, I'd stop trying. Then Ryan's birthday came. You know that part already. He opened the box. Called me a loser. Quoted his mother, my sister, saying I was just a lonely man with money. And that moment, that sharp, burning moment, was when everything broke. It wasn't just the insult. It was the betrayal. The fact that Ivy had clearly talked trash about me in front of her son. That she had weaponized my solitude, my independence, into an insult. And Ryan, 14 and smug, parroted it back like it was gospel. And the room, my mother, my brother-in-law, all laughed like it was the best joke they'd heard all day. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even speak. I smiled. And I knew, in that moment, I was done. But the universe wasn't. Because that was only the beginning. That very week, I found out that Ivy had listed me as a co-signer on a new credit card, without asking me. She'd used some old paperwork from the down payment help years ago, probably forged a line here or there, and the bank, seeing our shared history, approved it. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. I knew you'd say no if I asked, she said flatly over the phone. And it's not like you're hurting for money, Caleb. That sentence, that exact sentence, like a slap. She said it like it was my fault for being the one who didn't ask for help, for being the one who saved, who worked, who didn't blow through every paycheck. I spent hours on the phone with the bank, proving the signature wasn't mine, filing fraud reports, freezing my credit just to be safe. Ivy had racked up $3,800 in less than a month, clothing, spa treatments, a weekend getaway to a winery. And when it was finally cleared, when the bank wiped it and assured me she'd be investigated, she sent me a text. Just 2 words. Real mature. That was the moment I stopped wondering if they loved me. They didn't. They loved access to me, to what I could do, what I could give. And when that stopped, so did the illusion of care. I had spent years, decades, hoping, bending, apologizing, giving, excusing. And in return, I got manipulation, mockery, and theft. So I began planning. Not petty revenge. Not a tantrum. Something quieter. Something final. And it started with that little locked box. The silence was different this time. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't chosen. It was the kind of silence that follows a storm, not because the skies are clear, but because everything's been leveled, flattened, emptied out. After I walked out that night, after I canceled the phone plans, the mortgage autopays, the streaming accounts, and left that locked box on the kitchen table, I drove to a cheap rental cabin about an hour outside the city. It wasn't fancy. There was no Wi-Fi, barely any signal, and the heater made this high-pitched whine every time it turned on like it was complaining about having to work. But it was quiet. And more importantly, it was mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't part of anyone's calendar or budget or emergency backup plan. I sat on the floor the first night, still wearing the same jeans I'd worn to Ryan's party, staring at the wall and trying to feel something other than empty. But the emptiness was the first thing I'd owned in a long time. And I let it sit with me. The text started around midnight. Jonah, hey man, the Netflix is down. That you? Mom, are you okay? Ivy's in tears. Everyone's confused. Call me. Darren dude. You can't just pull the plug on people like that. I had stuff scheduled. Ivy, real classy. Did it make you feel powerful? I didn't respond. I didn't even read them after a while. My phone vibrated so much the second night that I left it face down in the bathroom just to get some sleep. The locked box was still probably sitting on their table by then, untouched, unopened, looming like a dare none of them were brave enough to confront. And yet, the weirdest part? I felt guilty. Not angry. Not vindicated. Guilty. That's the curse of being the family's scapegoat disguised as helper. You're trained to absorb, to fix, to explain away everyone's dysfunction. So when you finally stop, when you finally put up the wall, it feels like you're the one breaking things. But something else was breaking too in me. Something that needed to. I stayed in that cabin for 2 weeks. During the day, I walked. Not for exercise, just for motion. I'd hike little trails, pick up stones, sit by the lake, and stare at the water until the wind picked up. I brought a notebook with me, one of those leather-bound ones I'd been gifted 5 Christmases ago and never used. And I started writing. Not revenge plans. Not dramatic monologues. Just memories. Mom laughing with me when I was 7 and sick with the flu, and she brought me orange slices in bed. Jonah helping me tie my shoes in the back seat on the way to school. Ivy holding my hand the day Dad died. She was 12. I was 5. They weren't always like this. Or maybe they were, and I just forgot the good parts because they got buried under layers of entitlement, resentment, and conditional affection. But writing those things down helped. Not because it justified how they'd treated me, but because it reminded me I hadn't imagined the love. It was just lost, warped, and I didn't have to keep chasing its ghost. By the end of that second week, I was sleeping better, eating better. The headaches that used to greet me every morning like clockwork, gone. And on the final night, something happened that flipped a switch. I was sitting on the porch, watching the sun set behind a line of pines. My phone was in my hand, powered off. I hadn't touched it in days. But I turned it on, just to see. There were voicemails. Dozens. But one caught my eye because it was shorter than the others. 12 seconds long. From a number I didn't recognize. I played it. Hey, Caleb. This is Nadia, from the tech conference in Austin last year. I know it's random, but I saw your LinkedIn update about looking for something new. We're building out a stealth team for a project, and I thought of you immediately. Call me back if you're curious. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I barely remembered her. We'd sat at the same lunch table at a networking event, exchanged cards, talked about data privacy. I think I gave her a restaurant recommendation. That was it. But she'd remembered me. And something about that, about being remembered for something other than how useful I was, felt like oxygen. I called her back. Within 3 weeks, I was back in the city. Not in my old house. I didn't go back there. I rented a condo on the other side of town, near a park and 2 blocks from a bakery I liked. Clean slate. Nadia's offer was real. The startup was scrappy, ambitious, and deeply focused on building something that actually mattered, a decentralized tool for online privacy. It felt good to be part of a team again, A team that saw me, not just what I could offer. I dove in. The work was intense, but it felt like mine. I stopped thinking about Ivy's voice or Jonah's complaints or Mom's subtle sighs when I didn't jump to help. I stopped checking the family group chat. I think they removed me. Anyway, at night, I'd walk again. Same motion, different views. Sometimes I'd sit on a bench and listen to music. Sometimes I'd write. And I started therapy again. Real therapy. Not the, I'll go to one session and say I'm fine, kind I used to do just to check a box. This time I told the truth. About the years of emotional labor. About the guilt. About the ways I shaped myself to be digestible, palatable, useful. And one day, my therapist looked at me and said, "You know, Caleb, it's not that they didn't love you. It's that they loved the version of you who didn't need anything." I think I cried in my car after that session. But I also think that was the moment I started to rise. Because I did need things. Not money. Not help. Not even gifts. I needed respect. I needed space. I needed to stop apologizing for taking up air. And slowly, almost without noticing, I built a life where I got those things. Not from family. From friends. From coworkers. From myself. I reconnected with an old college buddy, Marcus, who'd moved back into town. We grabbed coffee, talked about video games, and ended up starting a weekly game night with a few others. Nothing fancy. Just laughter without sharp edges. I joined a gym. Started swimming again. Not for aesthetics. Just because I loved the feel of the water. And one Sunday morning, while browsing the farmer's market, I saw a kid pick up a peach and smile like it was the best thing in the world. His mom caught my eye and gave me a knowing grin. Just two strangers in a good moment. That was the first time I realized I didn't miss them. Not really. I missed the idea of them. The version of my family I kept trying to will into existence. But the real version? The one that laughed when I was humiliated? The one that forged my signature and mocked my kindness? I didn't miss that. I didn't want that back. Which brings us to the call. The one that pulled me back in, just enough to remind me who I was dealing with. It was Mom. Her name flashing on my phone was like a ghost rising up from the lake at night. I almost didn't answer. But some part of me, stubborn, maybe hopeful, pressed accept. "Hi, Caleb," she said. Her voice was thin. Forced cheer. "Hi. I hope you're well." "I am." A pause. Then, "We found the key." I didn't say anything. She continued. "To the box. The one you left." I waited. We didn't understand, at first. But then Jonah recognized the engraving on the bottom. Said it matched the watch you gave him years ago. I smiled to myself. That detail had been intentional. "What did you think was inside?" I asked quietly. Another pause. "We didn't know. We thought maybe a letter. Or something dramatic." "What was it then?" "You know what it was, Caleb." I did. Of course I did. Because inside that box, the one I left on the kitchen table, was a USB drive. With copies of everything. The cosign fraud. The text messages. The bank statements. The paper trail of every dime I'd sent over the last 10 years. And one more thing. A voice recording. A snippet from Ryan's birthday party. From the moment he snorted and quoted Ivy. The laughter that followed. The silence from me. Ivy had posted an Instagram story that day. I screen recorded it before she could delete it. I never intended to use it. I just wanted them to hear themselves. Raw. Unedited. To sit with it like I had to. "You were always good with data," Mom said. It wasn't a compliment. "Why are you calling?" I asked. There was a long, heavy silence. Then, quietly, "I miss you." I believed her. But I didn't believe she'd changed. Because people don't always change when you walk away. Sometimes, they just learn to knock louder. "I'm doing well," I said. "And I hope you are too. But I'm not coming back." Another pause. "Ivy's not doing great," she added. "She lost the house. The card companies are investigating. She said you could clear it up." She's right. I could. And I let the silence stretch. Let it breathe. "I won't." Click. That was the end of the call. But not the end of the story. Because after that, they tried something else. Something worse. Something desperate. And that's when I realized, letting go of them wasn't the end of my healing. It was just the beginning of their unraveling. It started with a letter. A real one. Not an email. Not a text. A beige envelope. No return address. Just my name written in sharp block letters. I found it in my mailbox wedged between a grocery flyer and a credit card promotion. The handwriting looked like it was trying not to be familiar. Every curve stiff, deliberate, like someone trying to disguise their penmanship. But I knew Ivy's handwriting like I knew my own. We'd grown up passing notes under our bedroom doors. I could recognize her capital G from across a room. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper. Printed. Typed. You made your point. Now undo it. No greeting. No signature. Just that. I read it 3 times. The first time with confusion. The second with amusement. The third with something colder. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a request. It was a command. Like she still thought I was on call. Like she could snap her fingers and I'd leap back into service, undoing the mess she created with a few phone calls and some money transfers. I folded the note carefully and placed it on the kitchen counter beside a growing pile of similar reminders. Emails from the credit card company asking me to confirm details in the fraud case, spam messages from fake accounts asking for urgent help, and a recent LinkedIn request from Darren of all people. His profile tagline now read, creative consultant and brand visionary. But what finally pushed me from quiet recovery into strategy wasn't the letter. It was the second call from Mom. This time, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. Your sister's going through hell, Caleb. They're auditing her accounts. She had to pull the kids out of extracurriculars. They're selling the car. I stayed silent. Don't you think this is enough? She asked. You proved your point. Mom, I said calmly. She forged my signature. She panicked. She laughed when her son humiliated me in front of all of you. She didn't mean it. She called me a loser with money. You know she doesn't really think that, she said, voice rising. She was just repeating what she heard. And there it was. I didn't even have to ask who said it first. They always slipped up eventually. I ended the call soon after that, politely but firmly. Then I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee and looked out over the park, thinking, for a long time. They weren't going to stop. The silence hadn't humbled them. The fallout hadn't sparked reflection. It just made them angry. And when people like that get angry, they don't look inward, they look for someone to blame. And that someone was me. So I made a decision. If they wanted a villain, I'd give them one. But not the kind that yells or slams doors or gets revenge in a fiery spectacle. No, I'd do what I did best. I'd be thorough, and I'd start with the house. Years ago, when Ivy and Darren were first trying to buy their place, their credit was a mess. Collections, late payments, maxed out cards, the usual. Ivy called me in tears, saying they'd found their dream home and didn't want to lose it. Could I help? Back then, I was still saying yes to everything. So I did. I co-signed. Not just on the loan, but on the title. We agreed that once they refinanced and got things in order, they'd transfer it fully to their names. That never happened. For years, I'd get random mail, property tax assessments, insurance policy updates, all addressed to Caleb M. and Ivy W. as joint owners. And every year, I'd remind them. And every year, they'd say, oh yeah, we're working on that. Then I'd forget, or pretend to, until now. I pulled up the county registrar's site and did a property search. Sure enough, I was still legally a 50% owner of the house. I scheduled a consultation with a real estate attorney the next morning. When I laid out everything, the co-sign, the forged card, the birthday incident, the toxic family patterns, the lawyer didn't blink. You're on the deed, he said. You have every right to force a sale or take legal action if they won't buy you out, even if they've lived there for 10 years. Especially then. I left his office with a folder of paperwork and a list of options. Option 1, file for petition. Force a sale and claim my share of the equity. Option 2, offer to sell them my half with a fair market appraisal. Option 3, sit on it. Wait for them to default, then take action when they're most desperate. But I wasn't interested in dragging things out. I didn't want to play landlord to my sister. I drafted a formal offer. I would sell my 50% of the property to them for a price just below market value as a gesture of goodwill. But they had 30 days to respond. If they didn't, or if they refused, I'd pursue petition. I sent it by certified mail. The response came 4 days later, a handwritten note in Ivy's barely legible scrawl. You're bluffing. You wouldn't screw over your own family. That's when I knew she hadn't changed one bit. She still thought I was bluffing, that I was performing, that I'd retreat the moment things got uncomfortable. She didn't know me anymore. And that wasn't my fault. I forwarded the note to my lawyer. We filed the initial petition for partition the next week. Around the same time, I reached out to a former coworker, a guy named Lewis who now did freelance forensic accounting. The kind of guy who could smell financial rot from a mile away. We'd stayed loosely in touch over the years, mostly swapping memes and startup gossip. When I told him what I was dealing with, he offered to help, not as a favor, but because, as he put it, toxic people leave messy trails, and I like cleaning. I gave him a list of names and accounts. Ivy, Darren, Darren's LLCs, anything I'd ever co-signed or funded. He started digging. What he found in just 2 weeks was astounding. Darren had listed me as a silent partner in 3 different business entities, using old contracts and copied digital signatures. One of those businesses had applied for, and received, a pandemic relief grant, using my name and EIN from a past tech contract. Ivy had used a PayPal account connected to my email to funnel money between personal and business expenses. Each of these actions wasn't just unethical, they were potentially criminal. I compiled everything. Organized. Color-coded. I wasn't going to sue them, not yet. I just wanted them to see the wall they'd built. Brick by brick. Lie by lie. All documented. And I wanted them to know I could press the button whenever I wanted. But first, I had to give them one last chance. I asked Marcus, my friend from college, to come with me. Not because I needed protection, but because I needed a witness. Someone level-headed. Someone Ivy couldn't claim, twisted her words later. We showed up to her house on a Wednesday afternoon. The neighborhood was quieter than I remembered. Less kids outside. The grass hadn't been mowed in weeks. Paint was chipping from the mailbox. I knocked. Ivy opened the door, and for the first time, she didn't look smug. She looked tired. Pale. Hair messy. A phone clutched tightly in her hand like a lifeline. "Caleb," she said flatly. "What do you want?" "We need to talk." Darren was on the couch in basketball shorts, eating cereal out of a mixing bowl. Ryan sat at the table, glancing up, then looking back down at his phone like I was a ghost. Ivy didn't offer me a seat. That was fine. I handed her a manila folder. "These are copies," I said calmly. "Everything you've done using my name, my credit, my accounts. This is the paper trail." She opened it, flipped through the pages. Her face didn't change. Then she laughed, short, brittle. "You've been busy." "No. You've been sloppy." "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Is this fun for you?" "No. But it's necessary." She looked down. "So what? You want me to grovel? Say sorry. Get on my knees?" I didn't answer. She set the folder down on the table. "You were always so self-righteous," she whispered. "Always needing to be the victim." "No," I said quietly. "I just got tired of being one." She didn't look up. "I'm not going to jail over this." "You might not," I said. "But someone could." Darren used my EIN on a grant application. That's federal. Darren finally looked up, spoon halfway to his mouth. "What?" I turned to him. "Did you not know?" "Of course not." "Then maybe your wife lied to both of us." I let the silence hang. "You have 1 week," I said, turning back to Ivy. "Pay me for my share of the house. Settle the accounts. Transfer ownership. Or I'll let the attorneys do it for me." Then I turned to leave. But just before I reached the door, I stopped. "I'm not doing this because I want to hurt you," I said. "I'm doing it because you've already hurt me. Over and over. And you never stopped." I opened the door. "And now you learn what it's like when I stop too." Part of me expected them to fight harder. I truly did. Some twisted, leftover piece of my childhood still thought Ivy would storm after me onto the porch, screaming about loyalty or family or how Dad would be disappointed. Maybe Darren would bluster his way into blaming me for his bad business sense. Maybe Mom would call and insist we talk things through like adults, which always really meant, "Caleb, apologize until everyone else feels better." But nothing happened. The door shut behind me with a quiet click. Marcus and I walked down the pathway. The air felt heavy, humid, like the sky was holding its breath. That week, though, that's when everything unraveled. Not for me. For them. The first blow came from the county clerk. My petition processed faster than any of us expected. Ivy and Darren were officially notified that the co-owner of their home, me, was petitioning a forced sale. They had 30 days to negotiate a buyout. When the sheriff's department arrived to serve the paperwork, the neighbors saw. And Ivy cared a lot about neighbors. I found out later that she screamed at the deputy that this was all a misunderstanding, and my brother would never do this, and I'm calling my lawyer. Except she didn't have a lawyer. She'd fired the last one 2 months earlier when he told her forging my signature was a crime. The second blow came from the IRS. I hadn't reported Darren's fraudulent grant application. Not yet. but the agency had already been quietly reviewing pandemic-era grants. A letter arrived addressed to me, asking for clarification regarding the application tied to my EIN. I forwarded it, along with Lewis's entire research folder, to the investigator's email. 3 days later, an IRS agent contacted Darren directly. He tried to blame me. Then he blamed Ivy. Then he blamed a rogue employee. It didn't matter. They opened a formal inquiry. The third blow came from Mom. She showed up at my condo. I didn't let her in, but I stepped outside. She looked older than I remembered, more fragile, but there was still that familiar, piercing disappointment in her eyes. The same look she'd give whenever I cried as a kid because Jonah broke something of mine. "When does it stop, Caleb?" she asked, arms folded tight over her chest. "When the damage stops," I said. "This is your sister. I know. She's the mother of your niece and nephew. And she forged my name, laundered money through my accounts, mocked me in front of her children, and didn't care until it started affecting her comfort." Mom flinched. "She's spiraling, losing everything. She had a decade to treat me with basic respect," I said quietly. "She chose not to. You're really going to let her lose the house?" "No," I corrected. "She's losing it. I'm just stepping away from the fallout." Mom shook her head, watery-eyed. "You used to be so kind." "I still am," I said. "To the right people." She didn't like that answer. I think she came expecting me to fold with one good guilt trip. She left with nothing, because I was done folding. Meanwhile, Ivy and Darren scrambled. They tried to hire an attorney, but couldn't afford the retainer. They tried to refinance the house, but the bank flagged the open fraud case. They tried to borrow from Jonah, but Jonah was drowning in debt too. They even tried to get a loan from Mom, who had nothing but her pension. The walls closed in faster than they imagined. And that was before the fourth blow. The recording. See, when I left that locked box on the table, the USB inside contained everything. The forged documents, the texts, the banking trails. But the very last file on the drive was titled, "Just Listen." It was the screen recording I took of Ivy's Instagram story from Ryan's birthday party. The moment Ryan opened the PS5, the audio was clear. Ryan's voice, "About time you did something useful." Ivy's voice, "Oh, stop, he knows it's true." Darren's laughter. Jonah's comment in the background. And the worst part, my mother's quiet chuckle. I never planned to send it to anyone. But I didn't have to. Because Ryan found it. I didn't expect that. I don't think Ivy did either. But he watched it. Headphones on. Alone in his room. And according to what Mom told me later, he burst into tears. Not because of what he said. He was a kid repeating what he heard. Kids mess up. But because he heard his mother. And his grandmother. Mocking me. Mocking someone he'd known his whole life as the nice uncle. Someone who always showed up for him. Someone who gave him a PS5 without expecting anything in return. He confronted Ivy. Hard. And when she didn't take accountability, when she blamed me, blamed him, blamed stress, blamed everything except her own cruelty, something in him shifted. Kids know right and wrong better than adults sometimes. He told her, "Uncle Caleb didn't hurt us. You did." Ivy slapped him. That was the fifth blow, not for me, but for her. Because the neighbors heard. One called CPS. Between the financial investigation, the screaming matches, and the reports of emotional instability, CPS took temporary custody of the kids for an evaluation period. Not to me. I didn't ask for that, and I wouldn't have accepted. I wasn't trying to become anyone's savior. They went to a neutral foster placement. That shattered what was left of Ivy's world. She called me 13 times in a row that night. I didn't pick up. My revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about clarity. About taking my hands off a sinking ship and letting the ocean do what it does. But there was one last step. The only active revenge I truly executed. The house. 30 days passed. Ivy never sent an offer. Darren never contacted my lawyer. So the court approved the sale. The market was good. Multiple buyers made offers. A young couple ended up purchasing it. Full price. After closing costs, fees, taxes, and the division of equity, my share landed at $178,000. I wired it straight into a trust account, not for Ivy. For Ryan and Ava. They don't know it yet. They won't know until they turn 18. But they won't start adulthood in the financial ruin their parents created. They'll have a fresh start, even if Ivy never gave me one. That was my final move. Not spite. Balance. The fallout? Ivy and Darren moved into a small rental outside the city. Darren's IRS investigation is still ongoing. He may face charges or fines or just a heavy audit. That's up to them, not me. Ivy is in mandated counseling as part of CPS's requirements. The kids are still in temporary placement while decisions are made. Mom only texts now, short messages about weather or holidays, as if small talk can fill the crater left between us. Jonah hasn't contacted me once. I don't think he knows what to say, but me? I'm okay. Better than okay. My work with the new startup is going well. I'm leading a team. People listen when I talk. They respect me. They value me. I have friends who check in, who laugh with me without sharpness. I swim 3 nights a week. I walk in the park after dinner. My condo feels warm, lived in, peaceful. Sometimes I reread the old texts from my family just to remind myself of how far I've come. Not out of bitterness, but because growth feels real when you hold it up to who you once were. People think revenge is loud, explosions, screaming, dramatic confrontations. But the quiet kind? The kind where you reclaim your life, your dignity, your boundaries, and your future? That's the kind that lasts. I don't think my family will ever fully understand why I walked away. But here's the truth. You can't rescue people who drown you every time you try to lift them. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is choosing yourself, choosing peace, choosing a life where being kind doesn't mean being used. When the court finalized the house sale and my lawyer handed me the final paperwork, he asked, "Do you want me to send them a copy too?" I smiled, closed the folder, and said, "No, they already opened the box." And that was enough.